La 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 la. Yeah. Woo!
Gonna record.
Okay.
Uh, I just want to get this on camera. It's okay for me to record this and share this with my peeps, Juan Carlos.
Yes, completely. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Jason Wyman. This is one of my artist chit chats with my dear friend and fellow collaborator and all around fabulous artist, Juan Carlos Escobedo. Hi, Juan Carlos.
Hi.
Hey. I'm just thrilled to be here today chatting with you and sharing a little bit about more about who you be with some of my folks, and then hopefully you'll share this with some of your folks, and we'll just build more community, because it seems to me that we've just been building community over the last year or so together, and it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think that, yeah, especially, I mean, you've opened up a lot of things for us to like communicate and talk about stuff, whatever. I mean, it's not just like you and I, but like other people. So yeah, hopefully this opens up something. And also I love a chance at just talking about myself for 45 minutes.
Happy to make
all,
that
like,
happen.
all Gemini in vain. I'm like, can we talk about me right now? Let's
When's your birthday? You're a Gemini?
Yeah, May 29th.
I'm June 12th. I am also a Gemini. No wonder we
Oh,
like
really? That's crazy.
that.
Dude, everybody hates Geminis. I don't know why. I'm like, we're sort of fucking cool. Like,
Yeah.
we're funny. We can get a fucking party going. We have like very interesting conversation, but whatever. It's
We
all
look
like the two-face thing. What's that?
we look fabulous too.
I know. Like people talk a lot about like the two-face thing. But anyways, whatever.
So
Yes,
this is a good place to start. Who are you? Who do you be, Juan Carlos?
Who am I? So my name is Juan Carlos Escobedo. I am currently working out of San Antonio, living, making, and teaching art, right? I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, or El Paso, maybe I should say it because people get upset if I say it with like a white accent. So I'm from El Paso, Texas. Well, I was born there, and then I was raised in Sunland Park, New Mexico, which is like really close by El Paso, maybe like 10-minute drive, even less, 5 minutes probably. But it's in New Mexico, so it's that like weird border between New Mexico, Mexico, and El Paso. So that's where I'm from. Um, and I wrote here that I make installations and objects that try to discuss the way that I have maneuvered through a society that has traditionally praised whiteness, middle class and above income brackets, and heteronormativity. So that's sort of what I've tried to like narrow it down to, like, why do I make the work that I do? It's because of that, I think.
Well, wonderful. You gave us a little bio. We heard where you're from, where you're calling from. But what is your artist origin story? I'm always curious, especially having so many artist friends, kind of like, what's your origin story as an artist?
So I took that question as like how did I start making art, right? Essentially. I don't
Yeah.
know why I opened that. It's actually it's a good question. So well, my dad was he was really good at drawing, and that's the first art that I was introduced to. He was not an artist per se. I mean, he was, but what his job was, an auto body repair person. So he would fix cars, but he would make these really great figures and very realistically too, and using ballpoint pen. So that's like the first, yeah, like interactions that I've had with art. And I really loved those drawings. For a while too, he was in prison when I was younger, maybe like 5 or 6, and he would send these really beautiful letters, which I didn't know. I think at the time I was probably younger because I couldn't read them. But alongside the letters, he would illustrate stuff, and he would make like these really beautiful birds and flowers and things like that, all again with ballpoint pen, blue, I remember specifically. And I just thought that they were like beautiful. And now that I think about it, they were almost like these illuminated manuscripts or something. Like he was just like sort of, maybe what's the word? Yeah, like narrating the letter to an extent, like through figures and art. So that's one thing. That's how I sort of started getting into art. And he later taught me how to draw using the grid system. He helped me out once. And that's how I got into drawing. I was really into it, and I just wanted to capture things that I was interested at the time, which as I was thinking about these questions and writing about them, I was like, I was really into some weird stuff. I was really into Sleeping Beauty, but only when she was asleep. I feel like she's an under appreciated princess or something. I don't know. Like aesthetically speaking, the movie was really beautiful. And also I was really into the Ten Commandments, like hardcore into like the Ten Commandments. Like every Easter when it would come on ABC, I would watch it and try to stay up till like whatever. It was past my bedtime. And actually I bring that up because
God, you're right. It was on ABC, wasn't it?
yeah, like they would always come on.
Every year.
Yeah, and my mom was like, definitely watch it. My mom was totally okay. Well, because there was like a connection to it because my mom said that that was the first movie that she went and saw at a movie theater. So she liked watching it, and I was like, oh, okay, I like it too. And it was just like crazy. It was like a really well done movie, especially for that year. Anyways, I bring that up because when I was in third grade, my third grade teacher really encouraged my mom to like support me and like make art and stuff like that. And my mom did, which is sort of a weird thing, especially from the socioeconomic class that I came in. Usually that kind of stuff is sort of frowned upon, right? Like drawing and doodling and things like that is usually like, don't do that, or that's for girls, or that's for little sissies and shit like that. So my mom paid attention to her and she encouraged me, and I won this contest against a bunch of fifth graders where I drew a bunch of scenes from the Ten Commandments. And that's, I never stopped ever since then. I was really into it. And I know that's sort of like weird to talk about like so young about how I got into art, but really that's what it was. And yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate kind of going all the way back to the way in which you were introduced to art through your dad. I think we're going to be talking a little bit about materials, and I think it's interesting to hear that there is a material memory about your
Yeah.
dad as well, and the blue ballpoint pen. So we'll bring that up again in a minute, but that is interesting. And then thanks for remembering or sharing the memory of the Ten Commandments, because I used to watch that every year. I grew up Catholic, and we, my family loved around Easter time watching all the, Easter shows. And I hadn't actually remembered kind of that ritual of watching that movie, but now kind of hearing all of the things, I'm suddenly in a place and a time with you. Do you know what I'm saying? And kind of thinking about all of those things. And I don't know, I'm excited to hear more, or to have you share more about how, and this will come next in a second, but how those memories even show up now. Do you know what I'm saying? Whether that be about themes of justice, whether that be about material choice, which we'll be talking about in just a second, whether that be about the ways in which memory even can kind of distort things. You know what I'm saying? I think that there's a little bit of distortion in some of the stuff that you do. And I know that wasn't necessarily on the questions, but in hearing you talk about it, I think that there's a level of like how our lenses of the world that have been shaped by our own personal experiences really distort the world around us, and kind of making that more visible, I think, is another thing that is often in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny that you bring up the, like, how does for example, being influenced by the movie Ten Commandments, like what moved me to draw something at age whatever, however old you are in third grade. But yeah, like the idea of this struggle that these people were going through, right? Even though like their religion, I mean, at the time you don't know, right? Like they're Jewish people, their like religion is different, but it's really the same. I also was raised Catholic, right? But the idea of like them struggling and like trying to get through, and essentially that was sort of like parallel. It was like a parallel of our own like struggle, right? Like living in Sunland Park, living in sort of like these shitty conditions. My father not necessarily being present, and like there was always like this thing, like go go go, like, and it's something that I experienced from like a very young age. Um, but I was gonna ask you in terms of like I know we're deviating a little bit.
Yeah,
In
go
terms of
for it.
in the Ten Commandments, you say you used to watch it too like every year. Did you like watch it as a family, or was it just you like sort of obsessed with that movie? Because I would watch it by myself in a really weird way.
We would watch it somewhat as a family. I know I would watch it. I'm like, now I kind of want to go and see it again because I haven't watched it in ages. I
Yeah.
mean, and ever since I pretty much left Minnesota, which has been over 20 years. So I'm like, now I kind of want to see it and remember it and kind of have those memories come back a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a couple of movies in my family that we had rituals around. That was one of them, and then there was annually The Wizard of Oz was played also, I think, by ABC, and we would always watch The Wizard of Oz. Those were like the two movies in our family that we kind of like watched on a regular basis when I was a kid. And I don't know, I appreciate having those memories surface because it's been so long since I've actually
Yeah,
thought about
we used
that.
to watch Wizard of Oz too as well. Well, okay, this is the last question about Ten Commandments and what was your favorite what was your favorite part of the Ten Commandments, like that you remember right off the bat?
I liked the visual effects. I'm going to be honest. Like, I thought that they did such a great job. It was creepy. It was like really freaking creepy. And it was not this like friendly movie. It was this very somewhat scary movie. And the effects really kind of helped give the atmosphere of fear. And I remember that really kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, launched my love of horror movies, even though my family my parents didn't want me watching horror movies. And yet at the same time, like, I'm like, but this movie
Yeah, exactly.
is
Yeah,
scary
that's
as
how
crap.
I know. That's how my mom was too. She would be like, no horror movies, nothing that has to do with the occult, blah, 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 blah. But then we would be presented with like that kind of movie that was very intense, I think. Even Wizard of Oz was very
Even
scary.
Wizard of Oz is intense. Yeah.
Very scary. Like it's a child, they're alone. She's like a fucking witch is trying to get her. Like, what is that? But we were anyways, that's cool. I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch it afterwards. Anyways.
I like these moments of shared cultural history across great distances. I think, as much as we can poo-poo pop culture, do you know what I'm saying? I do think that there is something about pop culture that kind of creates these cultural moments that can create these odd bridges, that we don't always think of. I hadn't necessarily thought of the Ten Commandments as a movie as like a cultural bridge until just now.
Yeah, I mean, and if I think about it, like, I don't know, there's not a lot of people that share that like of the Ten Commandments, but I know that people would, because their grandmothers or their mothers were like, let's watch the Ten Commandments, because it seemed like that was like a blockbuster hit when they were young. So it was sort of just like
Yep.
reinforced or something. Yeah, but anyways.
So how did we meet? I think, I've appreciated getting to know you, but tell folks on the other side of the screen, how did we actually meet? And I can also fill some of that in.
Yeah, I was trying to really think about it because I feel like sometimes I try to think about like the exact moment that I meet people, but I remember, so I was part of the New York Foundation for the Arts Immigrant Mentor Program. So I was a mentee, and Luis Valderas was a mentor in 2019, and he ended up being my mentor, right? After that, we went through the program, and then months later, I started receiving emails about like virtual drop-ins, and this was way before the pandemic because I was still working at one of my positions that let me go because of the pandemic. And I kept avoiding it because I was like, well, I don't know if this is going to be beneficial. And like, I made every excuse under the sun, right? And at that point, I wasn't like comfortable being like in a virtual setting or something, whatever the fuck that means. And then one day, I finally was like, okay, I'm going to hop in. And then I hopped in, and people were just like having conversations, and then you were part of it. And I didn't necessarily, I mean, I was aware of you because you were like very happy, and then your beard, and like you're very like a very specific looking person. But and then I was like, okay, whatever. And then I would jump in once in a while to the random meetings that you guys would promote. And then one day, it was right at the pandemic when it like everything hit, everything went down. I was supposed to be in a virtual, no, in a group show here in San Antonio, but it got canceled. And I was working on this like immersive installation, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna put it in my house and I'll go live on Instagram. And for some reason, I think because I was a little bored or something, and there was nothing to do and there's no communication. You guys sent out an email, we're gonna be doing this, and I was like, fuck it, let's just like talk. And that's when you guys presented the idea. You and Rupi presented the idea of the virtual art salon, and I was like, this is perfect. This is serendipitous. I hate that word, but it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And then from there, we've just been chatting, right? And then you also established the Queer Artist Salon, where I feel like different queer identifying and LGBTQI plus identifying individuals come and just talk about their artist practice, how it relates to queer issues, and trying to reinforce some of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a good summary. The New York Foundation.
That was really long.
It's a great like umbrella. I was a mentor for the Immigrant Artist Program here in Oakland in 2018 and 2019. I personally have been working doing virtual convenings for a while already, and so I was really interested to see if there was any interest in getting immigrant artists through the NYFA together on a national scale. And so I remember putting out this call at the end of our meeting in 2019 and just being like, so who would like to do this? This is my lovely cat, Lilith.
She's pretty.
Uh,
I've always wanted a black cat, but I can't because I'm allergic. But
oh.
anyway, sorry, go. Keep
No
going.
worries. She's very cute and distracting. So I put out this call and was just like, who wants to do this? And Rupi stepped up, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck we're doing other than I have skills. And if we're going to do something, it has to be built with immigrant artists. I don't know. And so Rupi and I just started chatting, and then we pitched this idea to NYFA to kind of do a series of convenings, virtual convenings, just to get everyone kind of gathered. And that went over smashingly. Like you said, we were already planning all of this before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hit amidst all of the, I think halfway through or maybe even right before the last one. And then Rupi and I just kind of kept those convenings happening very loosely. That's when I met Luis Valderas. I love Luis, by the way. He's just
He's really great. He's just like a really generous man, like super generous, and just like, let me tell you this. Like, I'm really suspicious of a lot of people. I'm suspicious of every fucking person I meet. I'm like, what the fuck is this person's angle, right? But when I met Luis, like, he's one of those people that just sort of like really puts you at ease. He's really great.
yeah.
Anyways,
I love him. I got to work with him a lot this summer, which was awesome. And so then we just kind of kept convening people virtually. That's when I met you, was through one of those kind of more informal ones, I think, if I remember correctly. And then Rupi and I were just like, we just kept hearing on these calls and from other artists, specifically immigrant artists across the country, that opportunity had just been drying up Do you know what I'm saying? Like, as you were mentioning, like you had this residency, but there wasn't any platform for any kind of exhibition unless people were self-producing exhibition. Do you know what I'm saying? So, you know, Rupi and I were just like, well, we have a community, we have a skill set between the two of us that can help people and artists specifically think differently about story and presentation and how to use technology. So that's when I really got introduced to you and got to work with you. And I personally was just so blown away, Juan Carlos, about how you presented your work and kind of the concepts behind it, how you used space, how we were able to like take an audience on a journey through your installation, even while in two-dimensional space. It was fun. It was just fun working with you and kind of thinking through that stuff. Like I know Rupi and I had a lot of fun just kind of like being like, oh my God, we get to do this.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I mean, you guys did a really, really great job of breaking stuff down in a way that was not too like, how do I say this? Yeah, like over intellectualized, or it was just like, I mean, it was smart, but it was like to the point and like factual, and just be like, okay, this is how we divide these two things, right? It's like technology and then like storytelling. How do we bring these two together? And I think that you guys did really great. Especially, and when we presented like the entire thing, you guys' presence was like really professional, and I really appreciated that. I had friends that came in that are not artists, but like they've always been really supportive, and even though they didn't like interact with either of you, they kept complimenting me on you all. They were like, oh my God, they seem like really sweet, and like I love Jason. One of my friends, Nubia Puga, was like, Jason seems so great. Like, I want to be his friend. And I was like, calm down. But yeah, like, I think like that generosity, and also just the way that, like, you obviously wanted to help people. And that I think that genuinely comes through, even through like a virtual space or a platform like this.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Take the compliment, Jason.
I'll take it. Thank you. And that's actually, you know, one of the reasons, just the sheer joy that I had working with you is one of the reasons, you know, for those that have followed any of my work, know that my father died the day after Christmas. And I remember that week after just being like, I need a community in 2021. And I'm like, I need something small. I want something that is focused on art making. And, you know, like for me personally here in San Francisco, while everyone loves to think of San Francisco as this like LGBTQIA haven for things, my relationship within institutional LGBTQIA space in San Francisco is one of tenuousness and not one that has ever felt good, to be honest. Like, you know, I worked for San Francisco Pride and quit the month before the parade because of a sexist, transphobic, abusive executive director. Do you know what I'm saying? So like that was my indoctrination into like formal LGBTQ in San Francisco. I was rejected from a queer organization, from working with queer youth, because all of my work had been in public schools and I hadn't worked with LGBTQ specific organizations. And I was just like, I've been an out educator for like a decade and I can't work with, like, literally you're telling me I can't work with queer youth because I don't work for a specific queer organization. It was just this weird, so my relationship has always been one of tenuousness to the formality of the LGBTQ nonprofit art structure in the city. So just really through all of my work nationally, through NYFA and through other stuff, I was just like, I need space with queers outside of San Francisco.
I was
and I
gonna
reached
ask
out to you, yeah.
Like that tension or whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't know what to label it, but with like those organizations, do you think it's because they're run more by like people that take on these like bureaucratic roles, or are they run by artists too? Like how is that?
I think, for myself, what I've seen is, um, the nonprofit industrial complex, because that's really what it is, has just become really corporatized. That corporatization has happened in youth serving organizations, it's happened in arts organizations, it's happened in arts ed organizations, it's happened in pretty much every single sector is this corporatization
Mm,
of it. I would say that the layers within San Francisco that become murky are intricacies of identity in the way that identity politics is abstracted and disconnected from a real material analysis often in San Francisco. So, my most concrete example of this is, and I don't want to veer too far off from our artist talk, but
no, that's okay. I'm
okay.
interested in this. This is interesting.
Great. I think I was just in a call with a friend of mine who's writing a book kind of about Southern art making and community centers of power, which is a term by Bayard Rustin. But one of the things that I brought up is gay marriage, right? So gay marriage as an issue, the reason that we have it even federally is because Gavin Newsom, when he was mayor of San Francisco, decided to start wedding people, same-sex couples, regardless of whether or not it was legal with the state of California. So he, and I believe it was 2006, don't quote me on the exact years, I'm terrible with remembering exact years, but it was around 2005, 2006, started doing gay marriage. He was able to wed a number of folks until a judge put a stop on it, right? And so a judge stopped that gay marriage, but he himself is the one that kind of advanced that. And because of that advancement, there ended up being some pushback through Prop 8 in the state of California. Then there was a pause on Prop 8, like right before Prop 8 went into effect. Gay marriage was actually legal in the state of California because a judge ruled in favor of Newsom, but then Prop 8 passed, so then suddenly gay marriage wasn't legal in California, but then there were more lawsuits coming out of California, and then those lawsuits ultimately overturned the Prop 8 and overturned the ruling, which has made gay marriage law across most of the land, all of the land, right? So like that's the kind of narrative around gay marriage. The narrative that isn't there is that Newsom was using gay marriage specifically in the city of San Francisco as a wedge issue. And he was using it in the positive sense. So it was a wedge issue to drive a wedge literally in the LGBTQ community, because at the same exact time, he was also attacking homeless people in San Francisco. So there was a program called Care Not Cash that he was advancing, which was actually all about reducing cash payments, cash general assistance payments to folks who are homeless or insecure. And so he was going on that path. There was another set of laws called Sit Lie, which was all about criminalizing sitting and lying in public, which was specifically an attack on homeless people. There was an expansion of real estate development and luxury high-end condos being developed across the city. So there was all of these things that materially were negatively impacting a whole community of people. But at the same time, the narrative that was coming out of San Francisco and the narrative that ended up becoming national was one of gay marriage, and how, San Francisco is this liberal space in which, and so that's what I mean by like, even within identity and identity politics in San Francisco, very specifically, there tends to be a lot of nuance that gets missed when we start talking about things, from a lens outside of San Francisco, because people see it as just like quote unquote liberal. And yet there's been a very strategic political push within the city to undermine social safety net programs, to privatize things, all of the same things that we're seeing at the federal government, regardless of whether or not it's a Democratic or a Republican administration. There still is this desire and this urge to privatize things. One of those things, even in San Francisco, was a little known thing that happened here was our Rec and Park department in the city of San Francisco was originally not considered an enterprise department. But I think it was either under Newsom's administration or the administration right after him, where the Rec and Park department became an enterprise department, meaning that they had to be not revenue neutral, but they actually needed to be they actually had to net revenue. They had to be plus, they had to generate money. They could no longer be just a flat, what a nonprofit would be, which is be a zero balance at the end of the year. They actually have to continue to make more and more money. And so what we ended up seeing as a result of the change of that department is the convention center, conventions taking over all of public space, right? All of our tech conventions taking over what little public space we have, because now Park and Rec, which oversees that public space, has to make revenue. So what are they going to do? They're going to sell access to their space. So this and all of this is really complicated in that, this is all against the backdrop of these wonderful stories about LGBT progress, which again do have material benefit. Don't get me wrong, gay marriage has material benefit. But, gay marriage has material benefit in the sense that it is still a selected right that not all people are participating in. Do you know what I'm saying? Because not everyone is going to be married. I benefit from that materially because I've selected into that. Whereas cash payments and safety net programs exist for all, and it's a continued thing where we just keep attacking all of the things where universality could actually improve material conditions. And if we specify how we're improving those material conditions for the most vulnerable, like folks that are homeless, like folks that are on the receiving end of systemic oppression and violence, like Black and Indigenous folks and immigrants and displaced and dispossessed people, if we actually focus more on how do we material improve the conditions for those folks and then extrapolate from that, how do we then also improve the material conditions for all based on that, I think that has a more unifying approach, but that's not what our cities want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I posed that question, is it because they take on this, because then it's just politicized, right? And I think that that's what's really great about the Queer Art Salon, that I think people are really just invested in. Well, when you pose the question of how do we know each other, what is the Queer Art Salon? And I wrote something about it's small and intimate, and I think that pushes this feeling of a secure space, but also a space that allows for mistakes, right? And I think when these organizations that are larger, they start to become these almost boundary guarders on their own, right? Even when it is LGBTQ, and start thinking about okay, what is going to benefit us? And yes, that's great. Obviously, we have to take care of ourselves to take care of other people or help other people, but never forgetting to these other issues that are still going to affect us or affect our neighbors or stuff like that. So that's so interesting. That's so crazy.
I like where we are, and I want to change the order of our questions, and I want to talk a little bit about theme. Does that sound good to you? And then go back.
Sure.
So, we're here talking about, the kinds of themes that I think interest us. I think that's a reason why I found joy in working with you and your work is the subject matter can be heavy. Do you know what I'm saying? The thematics that we're working in are not thematics that often are considered light or having levity around them. Do you know what I'm saying? And yet in the things that I see in your work, there's often a playfulness, there is often a sense of curiosity, of provocation, of kind of immersiveness that actually comes through in your work. But you're balancing these kind of like heavy themes in these like visually aesthetic ways. And so I'm wondering, you know, how does talking about your art and process and theme maybe influence your work, or what are you trying to communicate that might not be able to be expressed in words? Or, you know, we're talking about all of this stuff, but like, how does how you talk about it change the meaning of your art? And what do you hope your art conveys that cannot be conveyed by talking about it?
Yeah, so that was a really good question that stumped me, and I was like, oh my God, how do I answer this? But it was like good because it was like a problem solving, like how do I, what am I trying to do, right? And that's something that I often think about, like what am I fucking doing? Like why am I doing this? I think the easier question, and I will try to answer both to the best of my ability, but the one that was easiest to answer, but I had never really thought about was, or I did, but maybe subconsciously I put it away or whatever, was what gets lost, right? When I do talk about it. And I think a lot of the time, the humor and like the wit, if I do talk about it too much, gets lost. I think people approach the objects or like the videos that I make of Houseman or the collages, and they're like, oh shit, this is funny, or they like think it's like hilarious. Even the cardboard clothes, right? With like the label within itself, like me saying whatever, the description, the catalog description, people laugh at that and they think it's hilarious. But when I start talking about it, then that humor is lost because they're like, oh shit, he is talking about like these larger issues that are really touchy. A lot of people don't like to talk about it. I mean, I think people talk about it more now, but it's still like, ooh, right? And I think that definitely gets lost. And also one thing that I've realized, and I wrote in, sorry, I'm going all over the place, but in one of the artist statements that I wrote about the cartoon series, which is the cardboard clothes, I talk about using humor as a way to make the audience complicit, right? Because it's easy for people to be like, oh, I'm not racist, or I don't have these thoughts, right, on colorism, or I don't even think about like skin color, blah, 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 blah. But the moment that they laugh at the descriptions, then I'm making them to an extent complicit because they know exactly what I'm talking about. They've laughed at it. And then I go into it basically being like, we're all sort of like, have all these biases. Let's look at them, right? And what would happen if we had to wear those clothes or we had to take on those biases? And that's what gets lost for sure. Like the humor, like people are like, fuck, like this person's like got me, like, oh, fuck, whatever. And then people now like approach it like in a very serious manner and they're like, which should be serious, right? But I think like it can go back and forth. In terms of the first question, what is it that I'm trying to get across? I think it just depends. I think across the board, because I feel like I make two kinds of artworks. They relate to each other in terms of the way that I make them. So it all revolves around like collage and putting disparate materials together, disparate images, and trying to make one image. But across the board, I think what I'm really interested in creating like a sense of liminality, right? A sense of imbalance, and also a sense of, I wrote it down, I can't remember, but those two things, like this gray zone, right? Before I used to feel really uncomfortable in that gray zone. And I've mentioned this before, like being unstable or being imbalanced psychologically, emotionally. I think that that's something that has been part of my life since I was very young because of the circumstances that I grew up in and whatever. And now I've sort of realized that that instability sort of has made me a really good like problem solver and gives me the ability to articulate some things. So what the fuck am I saying? Basically, I'm hoping that individuals that are overly concerned with permanence, right? Because I think like our culture is really concerned with like, what is something that's gonna last? What's gonna last 1,000 years or whatever that we can consume and then potentially like give away or exchange it for monetary things. Like, hopefully, like that's what people get from the work, like this temporariness that the truth is that everything is fucking temporary. And it's a scary situation, right? Like that I mean, like I don't, if we think in the end, like everything is gonna sort of like disappear, nothing is like constant. But if we like embrace that gray zone, I think that it would make us more hopefully calm or something. I don't know. Sorry, that was like
No, I love it. I think, a couple of the things that I'm hearing in there, and this brings me almost back to like, again, how do we marry these conversations of, deep complexity. I think one of the things that we're talking about here is that there's nuance, there's context, that often the narratives that get sold about a place are not actually the narratives of that place, or the narratives of a people that get sold and bought and consumed are not the narratives of those people. Do you know what I'm saying? And are often not the narratives generated from those people. They're often, ways in which it's spun, right? And very intentionally spun for aims that are not to the benefit of the material conditions, which brings me to the word material, right? So like material is a huge thing that you personally play with. And it seems to really drive your artistic work. So how do you select materials? And what materials are you currently working with? You've talked some about them, cardboard being one of them, but I know that there are other materials that we work with. How do you select them, and what are you currently working with?
So right now I'm really, really invested in cardboard, right? And then anything that is like the equivalent of cardboard, right? So any material that's the equivalent of it, that's perceived as like a better quality. So that way I can use that as like some symbolism of how individuals, even though, and really that specifically addresses race, right? So I've said this before, but like I personally identify with the cardboard itself, because of the way, I mean, it's brown and then I'm fucking brown. That's sort of like the main entrance point, or that was the main entrance point. But also the way that it is considered disposable and something that's considered almost like utilitarian. You have to use it for a specific thing, and that's for like putting stuff away. And that sort of relates to me again, in terms of like and I know I keep bringing this up about growing up like in a shitty circumstances and being like coming from like a impoverished area. And that's not me trying to generate pity. It's just that's part of the work, right?
Yeah.
But I shouldn't have been an artist, right? That's the truth. There were circumstances that helped. My mom encouraged it, but the truth is, if I wanted to acquire health or wealth, or try to help my family, what I should have done, and what a lot of people in my circumstance do, is become a lawyer, become a doctor, become a nurse. And so that's like something that's considered useful, and it's gonna help something. And so to like I equivalent that, or if I don't know if that's the word, but I draw parallels between that and then like the purpose of the cardboard itself, right? That it shouldn't have, cardboard should not be this artistic material. And when I was confronted with this, or when I started using it, people were really pushed back. Like they pushed back so hard against it. They were like, why are you using cardboard? Why can't you use like a clean sheet of paper? Why can't you use canvas? And that's something that I I just didn't understand. Later, I understood it because materials have this hierarchy, much like people of different races are like assigned this perceived hierarchy, right? Like you're better because you're lighter skinned, you're not as good because you're darker skinned, whatever the case may be. And so I started to like really see that. And I held on to it. And I don't know why. I mean, I have some theories, but I remember specifically, even like people in my cohort saying, you know, you're gonna have to stop painting on cardboard. And I was like, but why? Like, why do I have to stop painting on cardboard? It's paper, it's just brown. And I'm sort of like, I don't want to be like, oh my God, I'm so amazed at myself. But I'm sort of interested in like why I hung on to it because like I said before, I'm a Gemini, I'm sort of flip-floppy and flighty, and people can convince me. If you have a good argument, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm not gonna do that anymore. But with the cardboard, nobody really had a real answer for it. So I was like, there's no reason. So don't come to me with that, right? It was the one of the main things that people brought up is that it's not gonna last long. And again, we go back into like the permanence or like the idea of like temporary. And I'm like, well, neither is that painting from that fucking Renaissance artist or whatever. Like at one point in time, it's gonna go away. But even then, cardboard is a really strong material that's gonna last. Anyways, that's one reason.
Yeah.
Well, that's one reason. And the other reason is that I always saw cardboard as something. So we lived in Sunland Park, New Mexico. My mother's aunt, who was really my grandmother, lived in Ciudad Juarez. When people, and in a really impoverished area, so when people would acquire lands, they had to establish a home. I think that was part of it so that they could avoid squatters essentially on their land. And what everybody did is that they would build these homes out of cardboard. I mean, they had a wooden structure or like a structure that was done to the best of their ability, but then they would use the cardboard and it was simultaneously insulation, it was covering, it was like all of these things. And they lived in these cardboard homes for years. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna live in this cardboard home for like 6 months and then let's acquire fucking $20,000 credit at Home Depot and get materials. Like that wasn't something that was available to them. They lived in it for years. So as a young person, as a young kid, I was fascinated by that. I would like touch the walls and be like, oh my God, it's cardboard. And my mom would be like, yeah, it's cardboard, like chill the fuck out. But I think that's one of the reasons also like cardboard has been really to an extent part of my history and even like my familial history. So that's one thing that I'm really invested on. I'm sorry, I went on and on about that one. But the other thing that like I'm also doing the digital stuff. So I'm making the Fruity Man series and then that tarot deck solely out of GIFs or GIFs and emojis using the Instagram story. And I like that because it's collage and I love to collage stuff, right? I would like to do, I mean, I just like working with what I have. It's accessible, it's free. And I don't have to like pull out pens and pencils and like draw it out. It's just there. And then I could just put it away, the drawing saved, and that's it. I mean, ultimately, when I'm thinking about materials, I'm always thinking about accessibility. Is it easy to use? And we don't have too many steps. Is it affordable? Can I make it really inexpensively? And then again, like the materials inherent meaning or history behind it, like with the cardboard. I should have started off with that last part.
I know, summarize it at the end, you know, whatever. One of the things that I'm hearing in there too is that there's a sense of wonder and that there's a sense of curiosity and playfulness that the materials that you have selected and that you choose to use inspire in you. So beyond just, you know, I think that there is definitely an ancestry towards why you've chosen some materials, do you know what I'm saying? And that there is also a sense of political and economic and socioeconomic critique in it, I also am hearing, as you describe it, a sense of joy in the materials themselves that they elicit within you. And so just kind of wanting to reflect back that it seems also that they just kind of, for that stupid, Marie Kondo thing, does this spark joy? It seems to me that the, cardboard for you kind of is that joy spark, that spark for you in terms of even your imagination and your curiosity and creativity.
Yeah, and that is something that, and this sounds like really weird and cheesy, but there is something that happens when I'm making, aside from like speaking about race and speaking about whatever, like my background and stuff like that. Like I do get like this physical high when I'm like, oh, like this is working, right?
Yeah.
Like when
I know
it's
that
actually no, yeah, like I get this weird high, and it happened like in grad school. I don't know if you, I don't think I've ever shown you the old installations, but I did this like landscape that came off the wall like 9 feet, and it was a replica of a home in Chaparral, but it was like balanced off of just like 1, 2, or 3 points in the actual space, and that brought me like, I mean, joy, really. I was like so excited. I was like, this fucking humongous thing is balancing off like 3 points, the ceiling, the floor, and the wall. And yeah, there is something that I don't know how to explain it aside from it gives me a physical high to be like, this cardboard can be a fabric, it could be a garment, and it could be a landscape simultaneously. Like that, where things like overlap, and it really does create like a sense of liminality that makes me happy. No, I said a lot, but I didn't say much.
No, I feel you on that. I feel like, a lot of the work that I do myself tends to be kind of excavatory in terms of my own being, and how I move in the world. And often my own movements are co-creative movements. So then there's a lot of like deep introspective work around how I, as, a white male perceived queer, show up in working mostly with artists of color. Do you know what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of deep introspective work that actually has to be done on my own end without other people around, which can be seen as, I often get told by numerous people, wow, you think about these things a lot. And I'm like, yeah, but if I didn't think about these things a lot, I wouldn't have the presence of mind to be able to find the magic, find the joy, find my own relation in relation to others, which I don't know. There's just been something, especially over the last 2 years, even slightly before the pandemic. I mean, really, in the conversation I had with NYFA was the beginning of like a real breakthrough in my own practice of like, how do we cultivate real intimacy virtually, which has always been something that's been of interest to me. But yeah, I don't know. I feel you in the like, even in the hardness, there becomes these moments where you have a breakthrough and you're able to see a reality that others just can't see for whatever reason. Do you know what I'm saying? And in the seeing of that reality, being able to create some sort of representation of that in whatever form or format that it takes in that particular moment. I don't know. I'm with you. I get it's good for my mental health. It's good for my politics. It's good for, my day-to-day living. It's just good for all of it. So I see that, and I feel you in that.
Yeah, the last time I was having a conversation with my friend Maya Anderson, who's also a really great artist, and we talk about like materials and stuff like that. And she was talking about, she said something about, I mean, obviously, I think it's really great to like reflect on the work that you're making, and you're talking about that, right? So like like your work with artists of color and things like that. And I think that that's awesome and we should be doing that. But there is something about like when you're deep in, this sounds so cheesy. It's gonna sound like super cheesy, right? But like when you're like deep in making and you're just doing and it's sort of just like a weird, like a reflex. And she equated it, I don't, that's not the right word. She made the equivalent of that to being like an athlete. And I know that sounds weird, but
Yeah.
she said when she was younger, she was a gymnast, and she says like I could do black backflips on the balance beam, and she's like it wasn't about thinking, it was about just doing. And I think that that's something that happens with the works, right? Where you're making, and then suddenly you're like, whoa, like it was right here all this time, and now I'm seeing it, and then you're just like doing it.
Yeah.
And then people are like, how did you do it? And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, why didn't you do it?"
Oh my God, yes.
So it's like a really odd feeling. And also like you can think about it and talk about it, but it's hard to explain to people that are like non-visual. Um, that's one of the things that I've told, and this sort of touches upon one of the questions that you ask about teaching and being an art educator. But one of the things that I emphasize with the students is like, okay, you guys are to an extent working with a visual language, and you can communicate emotions and you can communicate feelings, right? Through whatever, digital media, painting, drawing, collage, whatever it is that your preferred medium of, or your preferred choices. But we have to have the ability to translate that to a general audience for, I mean, especially artists of color, because then you're not potentially considered, you're not considered, right? Like, oh, this person is just doing shit. Like, oh, they're just like fucking around. And so having the ability to intellectualize it or talk about it through written form or verbally is really important. And I try to emphasize that by establishing like artist bios and artist statement assignments. But what I was thinking is that just like in any language, or like speaking from English to Spanish or English to whatever, there's always like this loss of translate, like something that gets lost in translation. And there is something weird that happens when you're talking about or doing or creating or whatever, speaking in a visual language, speaking,
Yeah.
and then try to explain that verbally, that gets lost, right? So like I can't explain that feeling of being like that high that I get when I'm making. And it's very rare too. Like it doesn't happen all the time. I'm not like here being like, ah, like I'm having from like making. But when it does happen, that's when I'm like, this has some kind of merit and I'm going to continue with it. And I think that that's what happened. That's the only reason why I can, I guess, say like that's probably why I kept going with the cardboard, even though people were like, you can't do this, or questioned it, or were like, why are you doing this? Like, why? People would be, my professors were like, it seems like you're doing something, but we can't help you. Like literally, they were like, I don't have any feedback for you. You're 1% who, generous professors to great, sensitive people who I appreciate and think about, were like, you're sort of on your own on this because we don't know what you're doing. And I was like, fuck. But I don't know. It was that weird instinct, I guess. Oh, I hate using that word. I just hate like romanticizing the idea of like being an artist and being like, it's just like this instinct that I just have. Like I don't, I think it's, there is like an instinct to it, but also
It's you know, I'm with you. I feel like there is, again, kind of going back to tensions, right? There's a tension between the idea of the artist as exemplar, which I think in some ways we both in our work try to fight against. Do you know what I'm saying? Like trying to be, I mean, I think that, part of, your material choice, whether it be the cardboard or whether it be the Instagram, the ease and accessibility of Instagram stories, is also, as you mentioned, about accessibility, about the non-preciousness of the material, to be able to create a connection with a particular demographic or audience. I hate those words, but communities that you happen to be a part of, that you want them seen and represented within art, or quote unquote within art. And so there is that, like, it is a both and of not wanting to create this essentialized identity of the artist as intellectual, who is the one that is able to have these breakthroughs for these particular things, while also recognizing and owning that is actually a part of the experience of art. Is not that you yourself are that expert, but that you realize your own expertise, or that you have a breakthrough in your own sense of being. Do you know what I'm saying? And that is the experience that we're trying to help cultivate. And we do that through, cardboard clothes, or we do that through, your tarot cards on Instagram, or I do that through this like sticker mural installation that I did with 2 artists outside the Asian Art Museum. But ultimately, it's not, even the object itself is not really the art and the thing that we're making. It is the experience that we are hoping to cultivate in the communities and bodies and peoples that we want to see themselves represented. And so even within that, thinking about like audience and non-audience, do you know what I'm saying? Again, kind of being bad words, or these are these stupid words that we use often because we're constantly being asked to write like, who's your intended audience for your work? And you're like, audience, I don't even know what that means, because I don't have an audience.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Oh, that's so great.
But yeah, I just feel like there is something there in both of our works, or that I see reflected in your work, especially too, in that it is about kind of unlocking other people being able to recognize that they themselves are the artist, not that you are even the artist in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like, and this is the last thing I'll say because I don't want to go in circles, but like I do teach an art appreciation class, and like art appreciation is very much about, well, traditionally the ones that I've seen, it always feels like an overview of like art history, right? And so students come in and they're expecting like, let's memorize these fucking names and these movements of art, which I think are great and they're important and stuff like that. But one of the things that I focus on, because a lot of the art appreciation students are students that they're just taking the class because they have to. It's like an elective or required elective or something. And one of the things that I really try to reinforce in the class is being like, you guys can understand art and speak about art too, because you all are experiencing art and are visual, right? You all can speak and have the ability to do this. You don't need a degree. You don't need somebody to be like, oh, you're at the end of this course, now you can talk about art. Like, no, you guys can already talk about it, because like in terms of like art and visual, I don't know, like a visual language, I keep saying it that way, but it's all around you all the time. And yeah, like just talk on it, just speak on it, and say what you see. And you don't have to over intellectualize it, and that's fine. Like that's, I guess, one of the reasons why I sort of remember I told you I'm going to be doing that workshop.
Oh yeah.
And which I'm still going to do, but the instructor was like, oh my God, these cardboard clothes, that's what we're going to be focusing on, are really beautiful. And I was like, honestly, there's not much to them. Like there's not much to them. And she was like, no, like you. And I was like, yeah, I think about them. And obviously like there's afterwards, like this reflection on like what they mean and stuff like that. But the moment itself, or like the actual object itself, didn't take that long to create. And it was sort of like haphazardly put together. But then again, that goes to like how we're taught in art institutions about what an art piece or the value that we put in an art piece, right? It has to be like drawn out. It has to take a lot of years. It has to be a piece that you've been like slaving over and over. And
Been
mine is not
torturous.
that. Anyways,
It shouldn't bring you happiness or joy.
yeah, right? Like you're not even supposed to be doing it for yourself. You're supposed to be doing it for whatever, the fucking Pope or something, so that he can be like heaven, or I don't know.
So we're coming upon the end of our time, and I want to make sure people know where to find you. So where can people find you, Juan Carlos?
So you guys can find me on Instagram. So it is at Juan Escobedo Art, right? Or you can go to my website. It's www.jce-art.com.
Great. I will make sure to also include that so that we have that underneath everything. And also, we will put that in the show notes and everything else like that, so everyone has a link that they can click on. Is there anything that you want to share in closing, Juan Carlos?
No, not really. Just don't overthink shit, but overthink it and then make it. I don't know. That's horrible advice. I don't know what I just said. No, but thank you very much for like allowing me to talk about the work, and hopefully from this conversation there was some coherent ideas that came through, and it's helpful to other people, whether they're artists or non-artists. Yeah.
Well, I just adore you, Juan Carlos. I'm so glad to continue to be able to create with you and be in conversation and community with you. For everyone else that's on the other side of the screen watching in whatever way you're watching, thank you so much for tuning in. Please, please, please go check out Juan Carlos's work online on Instagram. Follow him. I'm Jason Wyman. You can find me at www.queerlycomplex.com or at jasonwyman.com. That's where all my art is. Queerly Complex is where the blog is. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Have a beautiful rest of your day, y'all. Bye. La, 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 la. Yeah.